Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The date is 9th Rabiul Thani 1447 on the Islamic calendar and 2nd October 2025 on the Gregorian calendar. And you are watching Muslim World News with me, your host, Abdurrahman Muhammad. Let's dive in headfirst and take a look at today's headlines. Kenya leads Africa's AI agenda at UNGA80. Kenyans flock parks as government waives entry fee for World Tourism Day. On business, Kenya, IMF open talks on fresh bailout. And on sports, Indian teen jailed in eaten doping. Now on to our first story of the day. Kenya assumed a central role in crafting Africa's AI future during the 80th UN General Assembly, chairing critical negotiations and proposing landmark initiatives. Kenya now leads the G77 plus China bloc talks on AI and data governance, representing the voice of developing nations in shaping global technology policy. It launched the UN Dialogue Mechanism on AI Governance, proposed hosting an Africa Regional Center of Excellence, and backed voluntary financing to narrow the digital divide. Cabinet Secretary William Kabogo praised AI's potential for peace and innovation, while cautioning against misuse in surveillance, disinformation, and conflict. Tech envoy Philip Thigo called for inclusive, equitable AI governance that empowers all nations, not just technology leaders, to shape its future. Kenya's bold push at the UN signals a turning point. Africa is no longer just a spectator in the AI era. It aims to shape it. On our next story, the Kenyan government waived entry fees to national parks for citizens on Saturday, prompting huge turnout to reserves across the country. The waiver applied from 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. and participants had to present valid national IDs or passports to gain free access. Free access was offered at the over 30 parks and sanctuaries, including Amboseli, Tsavo, Nakuru, Mount Kenya, Marine Parks, and more. CS Rebecca Miano said the move was to foster appreciation for Kenya's natural heritage and boost domestic tourism. KWS issued guidelines restricting vehicles in some areas like Orphanage and Safari Walk to ensure orderly flow, while emphasizing that conservation remains a shared responsibility. With gates open and citizens turning out in droves, Kenya's parks became a living celebration of nature and the power of accessible heritage. Now let's take a look at a story that has been trending over the weekend. Two teenage Somali nationals accused of stepping on the Kenyan flag at a Nairobi stadium have been ordered detained for an additional 4 days for further investigation. Captured on video at Nyayo Stadium, the 14 and 17-year-old were brought before Milimani Children's Court but could not plead because authorities have yet to file age verification and social inquiry reports. Prosecutors requested time to submit the missing documentation, and the court directed that the suspects be held at Gigiri Child Protection Unit until their next court appearance on October 2nd. Defense lawyers objected to housing them in youth prisons, arguing they must be treated as children and placed in suitable care or released to relatives. Interior CS Murkomen called the desecration regrettable and warned that offenders, Kenyan or foreign, will face prosecution or deportation if found guilty. As the case unfolds, the court must balance enforcement of national dignity with the rights and protection owed to minors in Kenya's justice system. For our next story, let's focus on a town right here in Kenya. Wajir town has launched an 8-day campaign to tackle plastic pollution in streets and drainage systems. The initiative, called Wajir Bila Plastic, involves youth groups, local leaders, and community members working together to clean the town. The campaign is led by Islamic Relief Kenya in partnership with the Wajir County government as a way to conserve environment. Addressing the residents, Nima Adan, Islamic Relief Kenya's Wajir field officer, said their main objective for this campaign is seek ways to enhance cleanliness and tackle plastic that pollution which endangers both health and the environment. Omar Shano, Wajir municipality manager, shared the same views and encouraged both the communities and organizations to take part in public hygiene. Cleanliness is not just the county government's responsibility. We are all stakeholders, Shano said. He added that the campaign's success depends on all stakeholders working together closely. The campaign follows a previous 2 million shillings donation by Islamic Relief Kenya to youth groups which helped set up garbage collection points and run plastic waste management projects. The initiative, titled Enhancing Plastic Waste Management and Youth Empowerment in Wajir, aims to reduce plastic pollution while creating opportunities for youth. Officials say the program encourages community participation and shared responsibility for public hygiene. County leaders hope the campaign will inspire residents to continue keeping Wajir clean and improve environmental conditions across the town. Our next story takes us to northeastern Kenya, where President William Ruto and northeastern leaders have raised over 163 million shillings to support 10 madrasas in Mandera County. The funds collected at a major fundraiser in Nairobi will go to the Al-Tabashi Educational Trust, aiming to strengthen Islamic education and community development in the region. The event fundraiser brought together top officials including Health Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale, Governors Ahmed Abdullahi and Nadif Ahdan, Senator Ali Roba, and MPs from Mandera, Garissa and Wajir counties. Mandera Governor Muhammad Adan Khalif expressed his appreciation to everyone who contributed to the cause and emphasized that the funds raised will play a significant role in advancing education across the county. He said, and I quote, "We thank Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for enabling us to raise 163,218,000 shillings for Al-Tabashi Educational Trust to support 10 madrasas in Mandera County. Thank you, President William Ruto, for your kind gestures," the governor said. Officials say the initiative highlights a shared commitment to education and community growth while reinforcing ties between county leaders and the national government. Moving on to the southeast of Africa, where Madagascar has imposed a dusk-to-dawn curfew in Antananarivo on Thursday, September 25th, after the youth-led protest broke out over long power blackouts and water shortages. Demonstrators blocked roads with burning tires and rocks, looted shops and damaged infrastructure as police responded with tear gas and rubber bullets to push back the crowds. In a statement, General Angelo Ravelo Narivo emphasized the importance of the curfew, saying it was needed to protect lives and property after widespread looting and destructions. He said, and I quote, "There are unfortunately individuals taking advantage of the situation to destroy other people's property. However, many residents argue the curfew does little to solve the root problem: constant blackouts and empty taps that leave families struggling daily." In the streets, demonstrators waved cardboard signs reading, "Water and electricity are basic human needs. Let us speak out," and "Malgesi people wake up." Protesters also targeted newly built cable car stations and the homes of politicians close to President Andry Rajoelina, accusing the government of ignoring their plight. The unrest spread quickly through social media, mobilizing frustrated young residents. Now let's move forward onto international news. A mass walkout interrupts Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address at the United Nations. Over 100 diplomats walked out of the UN hall as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu began his General Assembly speech, leaving empty rows in protest of his Gaza policies. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu used the platform to vow, and I quote, "finish the job" in Gaza, rejecting Palestinian statehood as insane, and claim his address would be broadcast into Gaza to reach hostages. Diplomats from over 50 nations, including many Arab and Western states, exited in protest, citing rejection of his rhetoric and actions amidst escalating civilian suffering in Gaza. Several officials described the walkout as a strong diplomatic rebuke, signaling growing intolerance for Israel's approach among UN members. Analysts observe that Netanyahu's attempt to dominate the narrative may have backfired. His nearly empty audience underscored Israel's deepening isolation. What began as a global forum turned into a stage for confrontation, and the walkout may well be remembered as one of the boldest statements of dissent in UN history. From stories of real people and real lives, let's take a look at business and statistics. Kenya has reopened talks with the International Monetary Fund as the country struggles with heavy debt repayments. An IMF team is in Nairobi from September 25th to October 9th for discussions that could shape the country's next financial rescue plan. The IMF delegation, led by Mission Chief Haimanot Tefara, arrived in Nairobi on Thursday. They will meet Treasury and Central Bank officials to discuss a possible new program to support Kenya's economy. The talk comes just months after the country fails to secure the final 120 billion shillings tranche from its previous IMF deal. That program, worth about 550 billion, expired in April without completion. Kenya is under pressure. This financial year alone, the government will spend nearly 1.9 trillion shillings on debt servicing, more than half of it on interest repayments. Public debt now stands at nearly 67% of GDP, well above recommended levels. Officials say a new IMF program would help stabilize the economy, support the bottom-up transformation agenda, and restore investor confidence. The government has already trimmed this year's budget by 21 billion shillings to ease the fiscal burden. Economists project growth of about 5% next year, but warn that global instability and domestic policy slippage could derail recovery. The IMF team is in Kenya until October 9th. If an agreement is reached, Kenya could unlock new funds, but only if it meets strict reforms. Our next business story, right here at home. Kenya's insurance industry has taken a heavy hit. Profits dropped by 23% in the latest reporting period after claims rose sharply by 17 billion shillings. According to the Insurance Regulatory Authority, medical insurance was the biggest driver, swallowing nearly half of the total claims. Motor insurance followed closely, fueled by higher accident rates and expensive repairs. Analysts warn that policyholders may soon feel the squeeze. Premiums could go up and cover might tighten as companies struggle to stay profitable. Industry players say the inflation, rising healthcare costs, and the price of vehicle parts are all putting pressure on the payouts. The regulator says it is watching the situation carefully to ensure companies remain solvent and consumers are protected. This downturn adds to the financial strain already facing households as insurance firms race to find new strategies for survival. On a final business piece, Kenya's flour industry, once a key foreign exchange earner, is facing a major crisis as rising costs and falling margins force farms to lay off workers. This month, Naivasha-based Oserian Development Company sent home about 800 employees, citing soaring prices of fertilizers, fuel, and shipping. Industry players warn more farms could follow as export markets tighten regulations, especially in Europe, where Kenyan roses face strict inspections. The layoffs are already hitting local communities, with thousands of livelihoods at risk. Labor advocates say many workers, most on casual contracts, are sliding into poverty. The Kenya Flour Council is urging growers to cut costs through sustainable practices and explore new markets in the Middle East. Analysts, however, warn that without government support, such as input subsidies or tax relief, smaller farms may shut down, leaving the sector dominated by a few large players. Kenya remains one of the world's top flour exporters, but its future now hangs in the balance. From business and statistics, now let's take a look at sports news. On our first story, Kenya's anti-doping fight intensified this week after police in Iten, the country's world-famous training hub, arrested Aman Malik, a 19-year-old Indian national. Malik was caught in possession of banned performance-enhancing substances during a targeted raid led by the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya. A court sentenced him to 3 years in prison and imposed a 1 million Kenyan shillings fine, marking one of the toughest penalties issued in recent years. The case highlights growing international concerns over doping networks infiltrating Kenya's athletic scene. Officials say the crackdown aims to protect the country's hard-earned reputation as a powerhouse in distance running. On our next sports story, Mauritian cyclist Kimle Kotpienar is gaining attention as one of the top contenders at the 2025 UCI Road World Championships in Kigali, Rwanda, the first time the event is held on African soil. Le Kotpienar has had a breakout season, a monument victory at Liège-Bastogne, Liège a stage winning in the Tour de France, and time in the yellow jersey. She enters the women's elite road race with both experience and ambition, ready to tackle the grueling 164.4 kilometers route that features steep climbs and technical terrain. Competing in Africa adds emotional significance, and she wants to inspire a new generation of African cyclists. Many see her as a strong medal candidate in this historic edition. On our last sports story, South Africa captain Siya Kolisi has labeled their rugby championship clash with Argentina as a semi-final, given the tight race between all four teams. The Springboks sit in a delicate position. One slip could cost them the title. Argentina, now a rising force after upsetting top nations in recent years, poses a real threat. South Africa suffered a blow after Oxenche withdrew due to injury, leaving the scrum vulnerable. Still, Kolisi expressed confidence in his squad's depth, stressing the need to perform under pressure. Analysts believe this match could decide the championship's direction. A Springboks win keeps them in contention, but defeat may open the door for Argentina. Before we end today's segment, here is a fact we can all relate to. Did you know we spend nearly a third of our lives asleep? That's decades of dreaming, resting, and recharging. So dear viewers, let's make every second of our lives count. If you didn't know, now you know. That brings us to the end of today's program of Muslim World News. I've been your host, Abdurrahman Muhammad. It's been a pleasure having you with us. But as we've come to the end of our news bulletin, we turn to this week's feature story. Kenya's voices at the 80th United Nations General Assembly carried strong messages on peace in the Horn of Africa, climate, finance, and global financial reforms. The challenge now is turning those words into real change for Kenyans. Stay informed, stay inspired, and may peace be upon you. Here's Shaban Yusuf with our feature.
Last week, Kenya's voice rang out at the 80th United Nations General Assembly in New York, led by President William Ruto. From the global stage, Ruto pressed three urgent priorities: peace in the Horn of Africa, climate finance, and reform of our financial system, he says, is unjust to developing nations. For ordinary Kenyans, the question remains, will these global debates translate into affordable food, secure homes, and safer communities? At UNGA80, President Ruto reminded the world that regional stability is central to Kenya's security and prosperity. He stressed the importance of fully funding the African Union's support and stabilization mission in Somalia, which replaced ATMIS in January 2025. With Kenya contributing about 3,000 troops, He warned that a lack of predictable resources could undo years of progress against extremism. Backing his call, Foreign Affairs Minister Musalia Mudavadi urged the UN to adopt a hybrid financing model, a mix of UN contribution and AU/donor support. He cautioned that without such a model, gaps in funding for stipends, logistics, and mobility will undermine the mission readiness and put frontline communities at risk. For Kenyans living near the border, or for traders who rely on safe routes to move goods, this isn't an abstract debate. It is about whether peace and stability will hold. President Ruto's sharpest words came on the global financial system. He described the United Nations as facing its deepest crisis in credibility and capacity if it does not reform, arguing that structure unchanged since 1945 continue to lock Africa out of key decisions. Kenya demanded fairer access to development finance, sustainable debt solutions, and stronger commitment for climate adaptations. For a farmer in Kitui, those words mean more than diplomacy. Climate financing could bring irrigation, drought-resistant seeds, or better storage. For a youth in Kisumu, financial reform could create jobs through green industries. For a mother in Nairobi, debt relief could ease pressure on the national budget and stabilize food price. On the sideline of UNGA80, Ruto was honored as a global champion of adequate housing. He showcased Kenya's affordable housing program with nearly 170,000 units under construction and over 320,000 jobs created. But he cautioned that adequate and predictable international financing is needed if countries like Kenya are to meet the housing crisis head on. But as both Ruto and Mudavadi acknowledged, promises made in New York often struggle to cross the ocean. Funds may be delayed, tied to condition, or reach only selected regions. For AWSOM, the risk is that gaps in financing could weaken regional security. For climate and housing pledges, the danger is that Kenya families will continue to wait for relief that never arrives. For the smallholder farmer, the boda rider, the mother paying rent, or the youth searching for the work, UNGA80 is not about speeches. It is about survival, dignity, and opportunity. As President Ruto told the Assembly, reform is urgent. And as Mudavadi reinforced, peace and progress cannot survive without predictable support. In the end, the true test of UNGA80 is not the applause in New York, but the change it delivers back home in Kenya. Reporting for Al Huda TV, I'm Shaban Yusuf.